Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. This is the 42nd part of What If Deku Had a Robot Wolf. I hope you enjoy. Link to the original story and author in the description. Chapter 42, Children of Blood Aftermath. Izumi never left Himiko's side. When Tensei and several other pros arrived, she remained beside Himiko, hugging her and comforting her as she cried. When the ambulance Tensei called arrived, she got on with it, holding her friend's hand as they were taken to the hospital. When she was taken to a hospital room in the hero ward, Izumi went with her, and stayed in the room with her, refusing to leave. Physically, Himiko was fine, her body was uninjured and healthy. But mentally, the girl was fucked. Himiko died, her head was crushed against the pavement, her body then started moving on its own and attacked people, then her head regenerated, her hair and eyes changed, and then she somehow used one for all. What she had just gone through was horrifying, and it'll take a long time for her to recover from it. Still, Izumi was confused. How did Himiko use one for all? At first, she was worried that she had accidentally passed the quirk onto her when she gave her some of her blood, but then she remembered hearing one of the vestiges just as she felt a stab of pain in her head. She still didn't know what that was, but if she could still hear the vestiges, then she still had one for all. But then, if she still had it, how was Himiko able to use it? Himiko hadn't said a word since she regained her senses. She cried for a bit and spent the entire trip here in silence. Even now she laid back in bed, staring up at the ceiling with a blank look on her face, Izumi's Durandal plush in her arms. Izumi had long since ordered Durandal to deactivate Armored Wolf mode, and was now sitting on the bed next to Himiko's, Durandal lying on the floor beside them. She didn't know what to do, since Himiko wasn't saying anything, so she checked the Class 1A chat room. It was a buzz of activity, full of messages from those not involved in the attack checking in on those who were. By the looks of things, Team Ida-10 wasn't the only hero agency the Children of Blood hit. Ryukyu, Iwabami, Endeavor, Fat Gum, Apostle, and so many more. Plus, there was apparently another Nomu that attacked Ryukyu. It was shocking how many agencies the Children of Blood hit. Just how big was their cult? She was going to be having words with Stain once she got back. That is, if Nizu doesn't beat her to it. The attacks were still too recent to get any reliable information on them, but by the looks of things, everyone was alright. Those who were involved were quickly responding that they were fine, with the only ones yet to respond being herself and Himiko. Achiko was the only exception, as whilst she herself didn't reply, Nijaya responded for her. Spiral, Achiko's fine. She's just suffering from quirk exhaustion. Izumi let out a sigh of relief. She was glad that Achiko was okay, but she was still worried about her. Quirk exhaustion, how did that happen? Last she checked she could use her quirk for a good hour or so without issue, so what had happened? She'd have to ask her later. Nijaya didn't have the answers she needed. She quickly typed up a message saying that she and Himiko were fine but shaken and that Himiko might not respond for a while. That seemed to get Sue to calm down, the frog girl having almost spammed the chat with it directed towards Himiko. The vampire cat girl still owed Sue a date after all. It felt nice that her fellow snuggle buddies were getting close to one another. She and Achiko, Sue and Himiko, may seemed interested in all of them, even if she didn't realize it. Momo was clearly interested in all of them if her fanfictions were anything to go by, and Nijaya flat out said she liked all of them. Apparently, she's the kind of person who crushes at the drop of a hat, with a preference for cute girls. Still, a part of her wished that Sue and the other members of the Snuggle Squad were here with them. It'll take more than just snuggles to help them after this. Izumi, Himiko finally said, still looking up at the ceiling. What happened to me? I don't know, Himiko, Izumi replied, trying her best to give her friend a soft smile. I don't know what happened to you. But I promise you, we will find out what happened. Maybe your quirk evolved or something, or we discovered a new aspect of it. But no matter what, I will be here to help you, every step of the way. Himiko didn't reply, she just lay there looking up. Izumi frowned before she went back to looking at her phone. She was surprised by how much information her classmates were able to gather about these attacks. By the looks of it, they were all launched at about the same time, and most of them were quickly mopped up. There were very few casualties, and the only fatalities were from the children of blood. Seems like a few of them had gotten themselves killed, either from crashing a vehicle into the side of a building or by going up against Apostle. Yeah, she wasn't really sure what they were thinking going up against her. Her agency is right next door to a JSDF base. Seriously, you don't attack a death dagger and expect to live. I was still aware of what was happening around me, Himiko said. Izumi immediately looked back up at her. Even though my head was crushed into paste, I was still aware of what was going on. I could still hear what you were saying. Feel you kick the Nomu off of me. Smell the blood, my blood. I felt my body move on its own, she said as tears started to fall from her eyes. I tried to stop, I tried. But my body just wouldn't respond. Like someone else was in control. I could only watch as my body attacked you and Native. I'm sorry, Izumi. I'm so sorry. Himiko, it's alright, Izumi said. You're not at fault here. I was trying to kill you. Himiko shouted, turning towards her. I was aiming for your throat. I was literally trying to kill you. Even if I wasn't in control, it was still my body attacking you. I almost killed you. I killed Native, she said before she broke down crying. No, you didn't kill Native, Izumi said calmly. Rolls was able to patch him up and stabilize him. He's fine and being treated right now. It changes nothing. I still attack you and nearly killed someone, Himiko retorted before she laid back in bed once more. I killed that Nomu. I know Rolls said that it was a mindless beast, a puppet or something like that, but I still killed it. Himiko, this is a normal reaction to killing someone, Durandal said. Taking a life is never easy, and not everyone is capable of it. The guilt will take time to get over. No, that's not the problem. The problem is that it was easy, Himiko said. I don't feel sad or horrified, or even remorse. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed killing that thing and drinking its blood. I tasted the blood that entered my body. Even though I didn't drink it, I still tasted it, and it felt good. Oh, so very good. I just wanted to drink and drink until I had sucked it all up, she said in an almost creepy way before breaking down into tears. My parents were right, I am a monster. Himiko, you are not a monster, Durandal said as he stood up, but the moment you give in and admit that you are, is the moment your parents win. Do you want that, to let them win and justify the way they treated you? Himiko was quiet. For a while Izumi was worried that Durandal had pushed the girl over the edge. She didn't want to lose her friend, not over something like this. She didn't want her friend to become a villain. No, Himiko said finally, albeit a bit shakily, wiping the tears from her eyes. I won't let them win. I proved them wrong by getting onto the hero track, and I will prove them wrong still. Izumi let out a breath that she didn't know she was holding. What Durandal just did was dangerous, very dangerous. That could have easily backfired on them. She'll be having words with him about that later. But I don't know how I can continue to be a hero after this, Himiko continued. What have I even become? I should be dead. My head was gone. How am I even alive? Himiko, I'm your friend, Izumi said with a smile. We'll figure this out together. I promise, we will find out what happened to you as well as the extent of your new abilities. Himiko nodded slowly before she turned away and looked out of the window. They were quiet for the next hour or so. Himiko didn't say anything during this, she just looked out of the window out at the sky outside. The occasional nurse came in to check on them, but not much else. Izumi spent most of the time on her phone, occasionally looking over at Himiko. During that time was another message from Nijire. Spiral, Achiko's awake. Apparently, it's not quirk exhaustion, she just got hit by a combination of several mental quirks and a quirk that made her bust larger. So she's just resting it all off. Izumi let out a sigh of relief. Achiko was fine, that was good. She had no idea how she would cope if something had happened to her. Wait. What was that about Achiko being hit by a bust-enlarging quirk? Izumi, can you pass me a mirror please? Himiko asked after a while. The girl knew that something had happened to her face after it had been regenerated, but she didn't know what. Izumi nodded before she cautiously complied and passed the girl a small mirror. Himiko looked at the mirror with a blank look on her face, barely responding to the reflection she saw. Red, she said with a sigh before she lowered the mirror. This is natural red hair, right? Not sure, Izumi replied. Your face regenerated like that, so I had no idea if it's natural or if it'll revert to how it was in time. You just went through what I can only assume was a quirk awakening of sorts. We're going to have to check how this changes you, but later. You're not really in a state for quirk counseling right now. Himiko nodded. No doubt Izumi already had a good few ideas on how this happened to her, but right now she wasn't in the best state to hear it. She may like the change to her hair color, but everything else that had happened to her still horrified her. Best to wait a bit till things calm down. I knew I recognized that voice. A friendly voice chirped. The two girls turned towards to see Toru, while her boots and gloves anyway, standing in the doorway. Rolls was with her as well, but she looked sad. Toru? Izumi said, sounding surprised, what are you doing here? My mentor, Shinigami, took us here last night for some reason, Toru replied as she walked over. When the attack started, she rushed off somewhere and told me to help evacuate people. Once that was done, I came here just in case any of you were hurt. Guess I was right. Also, Himiko, what happened to your hair and eyes? I don't want to talk about it, Himiko said with a frown and lowering her head. Oh, okay then, Toru said, probably with a frown. She knew when not to push a subject. How's Himiko doing? Rolls asked, still standing by the door. She's fine, but still shaken, Izumi replied. It's not your fault, Himiko added. You said it yourself, you couldn't sense them. But, what happened to you? Rolls said before Himiko interrupted her. Please, Himiko said, looking up at Rolls, please don't talk about it anymore. Not now, please. Rolls nodded with a frown. She was strong, absurdly strong even. She could easily read the minds of everyone in this building, or move a tanker with her mind, and yet, she was unable to sense that Nomu or anyone else for that matter, all because someone had a quirk that hid it from her sight. Bloody bullshit quirks. Well, I'm glad you're both okay, Rolls said. Ingenium sent me to check in on you. He'd do it himself, but he's busy with the cleanup. The Children of Blood did a real number on the agency. Well, I'm glad that everyone's alright, Izumi remarked with a sigh, glad that the Children of Blood didn't kill anyone. It was then that one of Toru's gloves started to ring. And by ring I mean play the world from Death Note, as well as vibrate. What the fuck? When did you start watching Death Note? Durandal asked. I don't even know what Death Note is, Toru said before she pushed a button on her glove. Yes? Invisible girl, a female voice said. It was odd and somewhat familiar. Where are you? Ah, Shinigami, Toru said frantically. Apologies, but I lost track of you during the attack and am currently at the hospital with some friends from school. Ah yes, apologies about that, but there was a villain in the area that I had to deal with. The voice, Shinigami, said stick with your friends until they head back to the Team Ida 10 agency. We'll be staying there for the next few days. Understood, Toru said before the call ended from the other end. Adding a phone to my gloves was one of the best ideas I ever had. Izumi coughed into her hand. That was suggested to me by one of my classmates, Toru amended. Thank you, Izumi said with a smile before frowning at that woman. Why was her voice so familiar? You'll have to meet her, Toru said shakily. You'll get a better idea of her by meeting her in person. Also, who the hell changed my ringtone? I don't even know that song. Izumi shrugged, not sure how Toru's ringtone had been changed. But she was more interested in this Shinigami. A hero she knew nothing about and sounded familiar. Why was that? Oh well, she can find out later. Rolls, what'll happen to me now? Himiko asked quietly. Well, the doctors say that you're fine physically, so there's no need to keep you here, Rolls replied. You'll probably be staying at the Team Ida 10 agency for the rest of your time here. They have several experienced therapists and psychiatrists on staff to help with matters like this. They'll help you with this. I highly doubt you'll be doing anything else this week, not after what happened to you. Is it okay if we stay here with you for a while? Toru asked. Himiko shook her head no. I'd prefer to be alone with Izumi at the moment. As you wish, Roll said with a nod. We'll leave you 3B then, she said before she turned and left the room. I'll talk to you later then, Toru said before she too left, leaving the three of them alone. Izumi watched the two leave, leaving her and Durandal alone with Himiko. She would have thought she would have wanted Toru to stay as well since the two were friends, but she guessed that Himiko didn't want too many people around her at the moment. Izumi, Himiko said, looking up at her, please, promise me, you won't leave me. Izumi could see the fear in Himiko's eyes. She was scared, frightened, afraid. She didn't want to be left alone, not after what happened today. Don't worry, Himiko. I'm not going anywhere, and she wasn't. Himiko was her friend, and it'll be a cold day in hell if she abandoned her now. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world in Germany, a large number of people, both heroes and members of the military, were currently gathered for a meeting. These weren't just any heroes or military personnel, they were high-ranking members of the German Bundeswehr from all of its service branches as well as from NATO. The entity of Germany's top 10 heroes were there as well as the principal and vice principal of Millennium Academy, and several representatives from the WHA. With so many important people gathered in one location, something very important was happening. Sadly, something came up at the last minute and the meeting had been postponed, leaving the 30 or so people to just mill about in a waiting room for about 2 hours. Is there a reason why General Schläger is leaving us waiting like this? Johann, Germany's 10th highest-ranked pro hero, Tarman, who was a short man covered head to toe in tar, said, sounding very annoyed, I have better things to do than sit around here for 2 hours doing nothing. Come now, Johann, this is just part of the job, Thomas Blitzen, aka Blitz, Germany's #1 hero, said with a simple smile, we're not fighting all the time, you know. Blitz was a tall, well-built man with yellow eyes and amber hair and a hook-styled mustache, said with a smirk. The man was wearing black combat trousers and boots, a black trench coat, a black shirt and a metal cuirass with a twin lightning bolt on it. Tarman scoffed, I didn't become a hero to be forced to wait around whilst the military is busy wasting our time. We're heroes, not soldiers. Blitz sighed and shook his head. Whilst the man made a good point, they were expected to be able to work alongside the military during times of great crisis. Like the incident with Dr. Necro. He knew that he should be nice to his fellow heroes, but Tarman rubbed off on him in a negative way. The man cared more about his reputation and popularity than actually saving people. How a man like him got to the top 10 was a bloody mystery. Hopefully, he goes down the ranking a bit next year because Blitz did not like working with the man. A low squeak beside them drew the two's attention to the pro hero sitting beside them. A tall and very voluptuous woman with a cat mutation that basically made her a humanoid cat, ears and tail included, who was currently looking at her phone with a smile. She had red fur covering her entire body, with the addition of short black hair on her head, and her eyes were blue and cat-like. She also had a pair of leathery wings on her back. She was wearing a black bikini and black thigh-high leather boots. What's gotten you excited? Blitz asked. Helmine Kirschbaum, aka Germany's #2 top hero, Succubus, smiled seductively as she looked up at him. Oh, you know, just looking through the old photos of my little kittens. They've grown up so much over the years, she said with a squee. Ah yes, the triplets. They'll be taking Millennium Academy's entrance exam later this year, Blitz remarked. Succubus nodded, indeed they are. I asked them if they wanted to take the recommendation exam, but they all refused. They said they wanted to get in on their own merits. I'm so proud of them. She said with motherly pride, I just know they're going to pass the exam with flying colors. Well, I hope they do well, Blitz said with a smile, ignoring the scoff from Tarman. The door to the room suddenly opened and 3 people walked in. One was a curvy woman with the head and wings of a bat wearing a military uniform with general insignia on it. The second was a very short man with long brown hair and a large and magnificent beard wearing a black suit. And the third was a young girl with long, messy black hair who was hiding her face behind a large wolf plush, and wearing the school uniform of Millennium Academy. Apologies about the wait, the woman with the bat head, General Schläger, said as she walked in. Something related to what we will be discussing came up and we wanted to wait for things to settle down just in case anything from it would prove useful. Now, if you would all follow me please, we'll get this meeting underway. Wait, why is there a child here? Tarman asked, pointing towards the young girl, who started shivering and hid behind Schlager. That child is the reason why we're here today, Schlager said with a frown. It's thanks to her that we have information about a very dangerous supervillain that has been working in the shadows for the past 11 years, right under our radar. Now please, be quiet. We have a lot to go over and we're already behind schedule. Tarman kept his mouth shut as he and the rest of those gathered followed General Schlager out of the waiting room and into the meeting room. Several rows of chairs, each one higher than the row before it, sat before a large screen with a podium in front of it. Everyone sat down before the screen, save for General Schlager, who made her way to the podium. The young girl who was with them sat at the back of the room, where it was darkest, besides the vice principal and principal of Millennium Academy, her face still hidden behind her large wolf plush. The vice principal, a tall man with messy, snow-white hair, bloody red eyes, and somewhat tan skin, wearing a dark green overcoat, with its neckguard turned up, an officer's cap with Millennium's emblem on it, dark green trousers and black combat boots, looked down at the young, 15-year-old girl shivering next to him. He moved his hand over the girl's head, brought it down, and affectionately ruffled the girl's hair. The effect was immediate, as the girl instantly calmed down and seemed to melt into the chair. Alright, now that we're all here, we can begin, General Schlager said before she pressed a button on the side of the podium. The lights dimmed before the screen behind her turned on, showing the first slide of a presentation, with several images of an abandoned city, the Long Island Massacre. During the Avalon War, a fleet of Avalon aircraft flew over Long Island and dumped an unknown chemical over the area. The entire population of Long Island were killed in the attack and the area has been quarantined since. All the victims were covered with green veins and those with mutation quirks showed signs of mutating even more, she explained before she moved on to the next slide. Tokyo, Japan. A villain named Mutator attacked Shibuya crossing at its busiest hour, spreading a deadly mutation gas around the entire area. Only those with mutation and some transformation quirks were affected. Most of those exposed mutated into monstrous beasts who went on to kill all those around them. The attack took the lives of over 3,000 people and remains one of the worst villain attacks in Japanese history. Mutator and all of his victims were covered with green veins. She moved on to the next slide. Dr. Necro, his army of Nazi zombies attacked Germany in the hopes to find a way to resurrect Hitler. I really wish I was making that up. Whilst his regular soldiers were just reanimated dead bodies, his deadly abominations were mutated monstrosities that were difficult to take down. Said abominations all had green veins and were previously people who had mutation quirks. The Kremlin bombings, a small terrorist group called the Sons of Stalin, who wanted to bring back the communist regime of old, bombed the Kremlin with an unknown toxic chemical. All members of the Russian government were killed in the attack, save for the one member who had a mutation quirk, who mutated horribly. She died 2 days later, and her body was later cremated per her request. The rest showed signs of minor mutations. All the victims were covered with green veins. The dark rain incident in Brazil. A dark cloud covered the city of Aracaju and began to rain a dark black liquid. During this time all contact with the city was lost. When the cloud subsided, recon troops entered the city and found the entire population dead, with mutant abominations roaming the streets. The Brazilian army tried to herd the abominations into one area so they could deal with them easier, but they all ended up merging with each other to form a massive mutated monstrosity. It took the combined efforts of over 50 heroes, including Brazil's top 10 and several regiments from the Brazilian army to bring the monstrosity down. All the victims had green veins. The unforeseen simulation joint, an off-campus training site used by UA High School, was attacked earlier in the year by a group called the League of Villains. The League reportedly had a bioengineered monster with them, something they called a Nomu. It was designed specifically to kill All Might. It reportedly possessed multiple quirks. Super strength, shock absorption and super regeneration, but reportedly the leader of the League bragged that its shock absorption had mutated into shock nullification. It was killed by the League's leader after he reportedly lost control over it. No pictures of it exist, but one of the students did make a drawing of what the Nomu looked like. Note that it is covered in green veins. Now then, if you haven't guessed yet, all these seemingly unrelated attacks are, in actuality, related in one way: green veins and those with mutation quirks undergoing horrific mutations. Schleger explained, we have reason to believe that, whilst all of these incidents were carried out by different groups, someone has been helping those groups out by providing them with some kind of unknown mutation chemical. So far this benefactor has remained unknown and undetected, thanks to each attack seemingly being unrelated to the others. Until now, she said before the side switch to show the picture of a man wearing a gas mask. This man is known only as the therapist and was in charge of Avalon's bioweapons division. Up until Paxton had the division dissolved after the Long Island massacre, with everyone involved in it killed. The survivors were hunted down by Hunter, one of Paxton's deadliest robots. Well, we assumed they were. One must have survived and kept working on the chemical. We believe one or more members of this division are still alive, maybe even the head of the division himself. No one knew who the therapist really was, not even Paxton knew the man's real identity. The man reportedly always had his face hidden behind a gas mask, and from what we've gathered from the minions we captured, not even Paxton himself was sure the therapist was truly terminated. Couldn't someone have just replicated the chemical from Avalon's bioweapons division's research? Blitz asked. Paxton's machines have all been reverse engineered and replicated, why not the stuff from his bioweapons division? Schleger shook her head, unlikely. Paxton had all information about this mutation chemical destroyed, and from the samples of the chemical recovered from Long Island, whilst the toxic properties remain for decades, the mutation properties last only an hour. Someone has to be making fresh versions of the chemical for it to still be used to this day, and only people in Avalon's bioweapons division knew how to make it. Now then, with this all in mind, since these attacks have been appearing across the globe, this investigation falls under the jurisdiction of the WHF, Schleger continued, but, due to how closely this relates to Dr. Necro and that we have a special reservation to be in charge of any investigation into any matter related to Dr. Necro, one of our country's heroes will be in charge of the case. And, we already have an opportunity to gather some up-to-date information about this mutation chemical, she said before she switched to the next slide, which had several pictures on it that looked like they had been taken from a phone. One of them was of Ryukyu in her dragon form tackling a winged Nomu into the ground. Its green veins were prominent on its pale yellow skin. Earlier this morning in Japan, a group called the Children of Blood, a cult that seemed to follow the ideology of the hero killer stain, attacked multiple hero agencies across Japan. This attack is why this meeting was delayed. Included in their attacking force were 3 Nomu, different from the one from the USJ, but Nomu nonetheless. Due to this attack being so recent, information about it is still coming in, and whilst 2 of these Nomu were reportedly killed, we have reason to believe that the third is still alive. With authorization from the German Hero Commission, she said, nodding towards the short man with the beard, we are sending Dr. Elise Kirschbaum to Japan to dissect this surviving Nomu. We'll also be sending several heroes there as well to investigate the League of Villains, since they were the first to deploy such a thing, and are still around. We need to find out where they're getting these things from. You sure that's wise to send my mother? Succubus asked. She doesn't know Japanese, only German and English. And even getting her to lean that was a chore. She's our Dr. Necro specialist. She knows more about his monstrosities than anyone else, Schleger replied. If anyone can find out how these Nomu are made, it's her. Succubus shrugged, fair. I wouldn't mind paying Japan a visit anyway. It's been far too long since I last had a nice chat with Midnight. Unfortunately, we cannot permit any of the top 10 to head over to Japan, Schleger said. You are too high profile and would draw unwanted attention. Plus you would have to comply with Japan's laws on hero costumes and how much skin, or in your case fur, you're allowed to show. Succubus pouted, disappointed that she wouldn't be able to take a trip to Japan. And that if she did go she would have to wear a less revealing costume. Not that she needed armor anyway. Then why are you telling us this then? Tarman asked loudly, if none of us are going to Japan then why do we need to know this? Schleger strained a smile, muttered give me strength. She thought before saying, we are telling you this because you all need to be made aware of this new threat. Dr. Necro almost succeeded in destroying our country and reviving Hitler. If someone else can unleash bioweapons like his abominations or these Nomu anywhere in the world, we all need to be prepared to deal with them, just in case this League of Villains decides to drop a few Nomu on us, or any other country for that matter, she explained. Also, we need you lot to decide on which hero we should send to Japan for this investigation, because I'm not allowed to make that decision. Of fucking course, Tarman said with a sigh. Blitz, and most of the people in the room, let out signs of annoyance. He really didn't like Tarman. God, he had hoped that the Avalon War would have caused fewer heroes to just be in it for the fame and money, but no, they were still popping up all over the place. If I may make a suggestion, Blitz said, we already have the perfect hero to send to Japan to investigate this League of Villains and these Nomu they have. Someone who has experience in dealing with mutated monsters, the hero who took down Dr. Necro himself. The artillery hero, Grill. Dorothy Kunich. Our most deadliest death dagger. Notes. That will be it for this part. I hope everyone enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like and comment if you want part 43. If you want to hear more from me, subscribe. I hope to see you all in the next one.